Today we'll be directed by a very knowledgeable panel sharing community economic development experiences from across the UK. And combined with an engaged audience, this session has the ability to leave us feeling inspired and informed on the practicalities of local authority support to neighbourhood boards and the role that Cooperative Council's Innovation Network might have in supporting our members over the next 2 to 3 years. Before I introduce our panel, I'd like to take this opportunity to celebrate the Cooperative Council's Innovation Network. As a cross-party special interest group of the Local Government Association, we're proud that both councillors and officers are engaged in our network. The CCIN is a collaboration between local authorities who are committed to finding better ways of working for and with local people for the benefit of their local community. We provide a national voice for cooperative councils informed by real experience and practice, with the aim of drawing on, emphasising and framing national policy and political debates about the future of public services, local democracy and communities across the country. The network's open to all UK councils, regardless of political affiliation, who can demonstrate an innovation and a willingness to drive forward the Cooperative Council's agenda. We currently have 118 members, of which 43 are full council members who represent over 12 million citizens and have a combined budget of over £20 billion. We also welcome associate members from towns, parish, community councils and opposition groups. We have a growing group of affiliate members who are values-based, non-governmental organisations who wish to show their support and engage in developing and innovative cooperative councils. And our supporters are 21 individuals and organisations wishing to show their support to the CCIN. So as part of our dialogue with members, council leaders have identified 2 key themes focused on community wealth building and cooperative placemaking. These 2 lists you see on your screen are not exhaustive, but are more of a framework to aid delivery and inspire. Our network works because our members put in just as much as what they take out. And one example of this can be found among over 600 examples of best practice case studies published in a searchable online format, accompanied by our annual booklet. CCI members are encouraged to suggest projects where they can work with other members to find cooperative policy solutions to challenges facing local government. This slide shows a selection of documents, solutions and toolkits available on our CCIN website. The work is divided into larger collaborative projects called policy labs, where members work together, and smaller projects called policy prototypes, where members may wish to try something in a locality on behalf of the network. Outcomes from one of these projects was published in March 2022 in a piece of work led by our CCI member Birmingham City Council and CCIN affiliate member Cooperative Futures. And today we're going to hear how the fundamentals of this project has continued relevance in the age of Pride in Place. So at the heart of every successful Pride in Place location will be a strong neighbourhood board, bringing together a wide cross-section from local communities. The CCIN believes that promotion of cooperative values, including self-help, self-responsibility, democracy, equality, and equity and solidarity can help guide all boards across the UK. And you will hear today how some delivery bodies are considering structures themselves as cooperative delivery body. We might know where our nearest Pride in Place neighbourhood is, but should you want to explore UK coverage, CLES, a CCIN affiliate member, has produced a funding allocation map in a recent blog found on their website. So today there's a lot of ground to cover. Last weekend, our chair, Councillor Jim Robbins, and Pete Valance, our engagement lead, spent time with Steve Reid, Secretary of State for House and Communities Local Government, discussing a future role for the Cooperative Council's Innovation Network to be part of the support structure and delivery of a successful Pride in Place. Steve was also one of our founding members of the network as well. We've been lucky enough to grab a vox pop with Steve capturing his thoughts on the synergy of Pride in Place in the CCIN.
Hi Steve, so here we are today in Warwick. You've just delivered a very keynote focusing on Pride in Britain. So from a cooperative council point of view, we've got 20 members and we've got over 50 Pride in Place locations across the UK. What can we do to help deliver that message?
I mean, Pride in Place is such a co-op type program. It's wonderful that so many co-op councils are looking at how they can make these schemes work, because as well as putting the funding into communities, we're giving power directly to people. So it's local boards, local people, residents, businesses that will take the decisions about how that money gets spent. And the insight is it's local people that know best what needs to change in their own locality. So we're trying to shift away from a model where we ask people to just trust politicians to a model where we're showing that politicians trust people. Now that is the essence of cooperative politics. So we're putting it into action. I'm really keen to see what members of the Co-op Councils Innovation Network will do to support their Pride in Place programmes, because for me it is a model of what the future of our democracy is.
And I just want to thank you for kind of raising the profile of Pride in Place and just to commit us to support you in the future.
Fantastic. We're looking forward to working together. All the best.
Thanks, Steve.
So we will hear today from Carolina Medalaka, Programme Manager at Birmingham City Council, and Joe White, Co-operative Futures, as the team share their journey from a community economic development plans all the way through to securing 8 Pride in Place Phase 2 locations. This will be followed by 3 different perspectives of how local authorities are taking a supportive and cooperative approach to Pride in Place, from Thomas Fisher, Head of Town Centre Regeneration at Kirklees Council, Councillor Sue Smith, Portfolio Holder for Communities and Cooperation from Rochdale Council, and Neil McIlvenny, Interim Director of Regeneration from Inverclyde Council. And we will follow this up with questions and answers to the panel at the end. So I will now pass over to Joe and Carolina.
Hello, lovely to see you all. Thank you so much for joining. It's a great pleasure to speak to you again. We had an opportunity to give you a fresh feedback after we finished working on community economic development planning in Birmingham. This was hot off the press. We had lots of positive news back then. I'm happy to say that the good story continues. We continue working with Joe and actually expanding our reach. So we'll tell you a little bit more about it. Some of you may know Jo as well from her Co-op Futures hat. She's worked with many councils across the country. We will zoom into our collaboration in Birmingham and how we collaborated, and Jo will bring experiences from other places delivering community economic development planning. Just as a background, when we met and how we met, we started collaborating in 2016-17 on a program funded by European funding, back then innovative funding from Urban Innovative Actions. You can see the logo in the middle of the screen. The project was called Unlocking Social and Economic Innovation Together, and one of the biggest part of the delivery was a huge partnership project with 15 large organizations, including hospital, 2 universities, the council, and lots of social economy organizations, cooperative organizations, and third sectors. And one of the big pillar of the delivery was actually community economic development planning in an area of Birmingham called North Edgbaston. I am now working on East Birmingham Regeneration Program. This is the largest regeneration scheme in the country. It covers a quarter of our city. I'll zoom into this a little bit more later on. And my role is the Program Development Manager and Inclusive Economy Lead. Jo, over to you.
Thank you, Carolina. I'm Jo White, and I do know some of you on the call. I'm the Executive Director of Co-operative Futures. We are an affiliate member of CCIN, and we are what's known as a cooperative development body. So we've been around since 2000, and our role is really to support cooperatives, community-owned enterprises in their sort of emerging from startup through to sort of growth in all sorts of forms. But also our role is to help engage in discussions where mutual solutions that communities are facing can be found. And really that's where, for us, we became involved in community economic development planning, which Carolina said was part of the Use It programme. And Carolina will talk about some of the work we're doing in East Birmingham and beyond in a minute, but we continue to be engaged in that work there, building on the outcomes that came out from the community economic development planning. Pete, do you want to move the slide on? In 2022, we did write a policy lab on community economic development planning and how it can be used as a tool. And this predates all the Pride in Place announcements and areas that we've got now. But you'll hopefully see the synergies between what we did and what's in that report with the Pride in Place activity. So what is community economic development planning? We often see economic development and economic strategies come down from above, and certainly communities at grassroots level fail to engage in what they mean and feel the outcomes and the outputs of them. So community economic development planning is a process that's led by local people, building on what they know about their local areas and what's happening. And it's about increasing and creating economic opportunities and better social conditions locally. Not to be confused with community development. This very much has a focus on the economy. It is about getting communities to recognise the economies that they within their ecosystem, and how they can use the economy as a means to an end. And it's not all about GDP and growth. It's actually about how it can enrich life within communities. But the community sits at the heart of it. And some of the methodology will really chime with the Pride in Place structures. When we talk about strong local economy, what do we mean? We're looking at positive social outcomes and positive environmental outcomes. It is about living within the ecological limits. And when we talk about them, we're looking at good jobs, strong local multipliers, but also the well-being, the ability to affect change. And I think within communities, that's something that they often feel disempowered about. And this is about passing that power back. And also efficient use of resource. As part of the policy lab, we looked at a number of different case studies from Croydon, from Birmingham, and from Gloucester. And really just to touch on the heart of them and what came out of them. The ones in the middle that you can see there were part of the Use It programme. These were sort of the legacy pieces that came out of the Use It programme, having done the work around what's the macro, how does it relate to the micro. This was then about those communities being able to use those opportunities. I'll just touch on them very quickly. You can see one grouping in the middle around Edgbaston Reservoir, and this is an area that the Use It programme was focused on, and it was about how do we embed economy. So there were actually three aspects to the Edgbaston Reservoir model. The first one was the little red building that you can see there. Around the reservoir, there was an unused playing field, which had been owned by a local charity that didn't quite know what to do with it. So by bringing the community together and kind of saying, what is this unused asset that we can bring back into use? What can we do? And the charity were really keen to engage in this process. And the idea came about to put a building on it that would provide fairly basic services, but that would enable use by the community. And through the work of this, the building was sort of co-created. It got through planning, which quite often is a challenge in these sorts of areas. And in 2021, the Red Shed was built, which was quite exciting. And I had a quick look on the website this morning, and the use that's gone on in that space. It's now known as the Nature and Wellbeing Centre. It holds community events, it hosts children's groups, it has everything from a cuppa and a chatter, which is part of the Ageing Well programme. So you can see how it's spanning the generations. And since then, they've built an amphitheatre for performances to happen on the site as well.
interject, Joe, I'll just say that the starting point was you know, the worst what you can imagine. This was a spot, that playing field was a spot for drug users, for prostitution, for all sorts of antisocial behaviors. When we started working there, the official council's position was to board it all off and actually prohibit any entry to that site because it was deemed too dangerous. So that difference we've managed to achieve over the years is probably the most significant victory in that project, and something that people can almost touch and understand. We've done a lot more thinking about jobs and economic opportunities and building on that, but that starting point and the ability to demonstrate it on a place where you can go to and experience it is probably the most transformative. Sorry, Joe, over to you.
So that's okay. As I say, there's such a journey to talk about here. Eat, Make, Play was part of community economic development planning, is to build cooperatives, social enterprises, community-owned enterprise, and it very much sits there. And one of the outcomes of that particular piece of work was a cooperative called Eat, Make, Play, which looked at really reuse, recycling of resources that already exist in the community, from surplus food to surplus items that could be upcycled, and also people's skills and talents that were used. In the middle, and I am focusing on this one a little bit because it's quite an important one, was after the end of the Use It programme, the council for Edgbaston Reservoir had come up with a number of different master plans over the year about how they use the site and the surrounding areas. And the immediate response of the community had always been, no, we don't want that, we don't like it. And it had always been a really, really negative response. What came out of the community economic development planning was actually the community felt they'd got the confidence to put forward their own master plan. So they designed their own master plan. They really sort of, instead of engaging in a negative way, were able to put forward suggestions and solutions that they as a community wanted to see. And so that was a really, really strong outcome that came from the process that we went through. Briefly touching on the other ones, sorry, there were two others in Birmingham that happened around different sort of things, but coming out of all of those were the assets, the buildings, the assets, the physical spaces. Power of Three was a slightly different one. It was actually a geographically based one that looked at a community as a whole, and it was across 3 wards within the peripheral estates in Gloucester. It was very focused around local leadership and a shared vision, and the outcomes of that one was that it was adopted by partners. It was adopted by the local housing association and other voluntary sector organisations, and from then it drew down at that stage about 1.25 million from the Estates Regeneration Fund, as it was seen as sitting at the heart of the regeneration of that space. South Norwood in Croydon was We Love South Norwood. It took on 4 themes. It wanted to develop a stronger local identity. It wanted to bring back into life lots of empty retail units that sat in their ward, and again, great synergy. It wanted to enhance the existing community assets and build that network. So again, you can really see the synergies. These were just some sort of quotes that came through from people about confidence, the process, the framework, and also just accepting that these things take time. What makes a successful community economic development plan? It takes time. Communities and other partners need to learn to work together and develop and build trust in each other. Getting the right partners around the table is really important. This isn't something that communities do on their own. They need to bring in partners such as local businesses, statutory agencies, other community organisations, to make sure it's got that hold across the whole of the community. It needs the resource. It can't just happen on its own. It needs support, it needs time, and often needs facilitation. But key to it all is that shared vision, that making sure that everybody is moving in the right direction and understands why they're doing what they're doing. So at the heart of it is that shared vision. So last bit from me, what's it got to do with Pride in Place? Pride in Place focuses on 3 core areas: building stronger community, creating thriving places, and empowering local people. Community economic development is led by people within the community based on local knowledge and local action, with the aim of creating economic opportunities and better social conditions locally. It feels like they're saying the same thing. So I'm going to hand back to Carolina now.
Thank you, Jo. So moving on from that, you would ask, so if we are focusing so much on the local economy and communities driving it, what is the role for local authorities, and what can local authorities do to really enable the right kind of economic development at the hyper-local level, which we are looking at in Pride in Place, and how does that compare with the overall city vision and large regeneration programs? So when we ended up working on the Use It project, one of the biggest takeaways that was there for me was that local authorities are a major unlocker. We can really change a lot in terms on the macro level, but we can also be a major blockages, and we can really be the negative force. So navigating that is really, really difficult. And one of the things my communities used to say to me is that, you know, if the council did as little as stopped blocking us, it would be the best thing that they have ever done. So I took it away with me. Since then, my role expanded. I was asked to take a role of the program development manager for a quarter of Birmingham, the East Birmingham Inclusive Growth Program. So I'm the Inclusive Growth Economy lead for East Birmingham. And there we suddenly have this huge macro scale of the largest regeneration program in the country, with HS2 cutting right across this. It's the black line at the sort of top of the picture here, with the new Curzon Street station where the terminal is going to be, with the sports court and the new Blue Stadium being built, with the investment zone, with the Birmingham Knowledge Quarter, 2 universities, massive development opportunities, new industries emerging, and Tisley Energy Park with the future of energy, with the National Centre for Decarbonisation of Heat, and all of that. And among this, and if you go, Pete, to the next slide, you will see the geography of the area with the challenges that we have. And actually, this is the black highlighted parts are one back. Yes, thank you. Among that, so this is the East Birmingham program, the bit in the middle, with the areas of deprivation being in pink. So you see that concentration of issues, which you know, you've got here the stats on the right hand side. It's a population of nearly 400,000 people, and really 18.5% of the combined authority area claimants live there for unemployment, and you know, 2% of the national climate population live in this area. This is huge. So the challenges are massive, opportunities are massive. So, you know, within this are 4 Pride in Place neighborhoods. We've got the Sparkbrook North, Neutral, Glebe Farm, and Fox Hollies within this area. So how would these neighborhoods work and connect with these macro scale opportunities? And this is what my role has been in the recent years. So if we go to the next slide, Pete. Those are the problems that we're seeing at the city level. So despite the Pride in Place investment, the big opportunities, the picture across the board is rather stark, and I'm sure you all relate to that, and you see this in your own geographies. We have rising inequality and the cost of living. We have the shrinking third sector funding that impacts organization across the board. We've got short-term outputs driven funding that focuses and dials in on specific issues, but we've got less and less funding like the youth program that allowed us to make such a big difference that Joe talked about. We definitely have a capital asset gap. And organizations are often not investment ready. And we as cities have fragmented social value picture. We really struggle to utilize the levers that we have in the most impactful way. So looking at that, I've decided to really change this and take it as opportunities and really focus on, so if this is what we know, how do we change that and move on to a positive change? So we've worked with a Dutch city, Rotterdam, for the last 5 years, over 5 years now, and observed a model that they successfully created in Rotterdam. It's called the Rotterdam Impact Coalition, that basically supports the impact economy with a blended finance that is directed from the city, but brings in private investment through social value obligations, corporate social responsibility, and philanthropy. And recently, we managed to launch a pilot, Birmingham pilot. So this is what I'm bringing here for you. So what could city do to match the pride and place energy that we need in the neighborhoods with more strategic thinking and strategic planning, and what kind of funding we can put at the back to keep supporting what's happening in the neighborhoods. And so our pilot focused on assets and on the strength of the partnership. So those are the partners that we've managed to mobilize for Birmingham. We've got the council, we've got an external fund holder that holds the funding for us. For our purpose is a national fund, the Barrow Cadbury Trust, who have historic links to Birmingham. And we also have the business and governance and legal support. And there's a contract that Joe holds for us, the Co-Futures holds for us. And we also have the impact and data analysis for the whole program. So how is this, and next slide please, Pete, how is this different from just the partnership? It is more strategic. The governance is important here, and that fund, the blended finance fund, and the transparency that it brings, we actually establish a portal that shows how the money flows and where we allocate the money, and really it has a well-defined delivery mechanism that's attached to it, that provides that additional transparency that as local authorities we often struggle with. So it matches that. So this is not the existing pride and place money, this is additional money, and it that we putting forward as well to make sure that there is a smooth transition and a strong legacy from the program, that we don't fall into the trap of a one-off intervention again. Pride and Place is a long program, but it will, the end will come quickly. So actually, and as Joe said, that mobilization, especially if you think about assets and social capital, takes time. It takes a lot of time to build the capacity on the hyperlocal level. So we need to be able to support it in a smart way. So this is going back to the usage framework. You need to allow the micro to be built at the community level, but as a city, we need to understand our levers. We need to understand our capacity and what we need to put in place. And this is huge development projects, capital investment infrastructure, but it's also jobs including public sector jobs. So it's the community wealth building framework here that becomes really, really useful. It's contract for local businesses, it's local assets. And actually bringing the two together is the most important for the success of every neighborhood. But the role of the bridge is that pivotal role. This is what connects the macro scale with the micro scale. So Co-Futures and Joe's organization has been one of the bridges that we've successfully utilized to connect the big scale, macro scale with the hyperlocal level. This is just the short view into literally the last half a year, what we did with our UK SPF business pillar money, we put 200,000 into the pilot that managed to connect additional 50,000 social value contribution from our large contracts. And this work focused on assets, specifically on community organizations. So not just not national third sector organizations that can move from one neighborhood to the other, but actually community anchors rooted in the neighborhoods that all are interested in either acquiring assets or improving assets that they have, and identifying greater income generation, so diversifying the income streams, reducing grant dependency. So we started working with 25 organizations. 14 of them received detailed diagnostic and support, and 7 have been awarded with enablement grants. 8 of them are preparing for social finance going forward. And this is the photo is from one of them, one of the successful applicants for our grant union, who are right in the next to the high-speed 2 terminal, and are opening the art center next to it. So absolutely brilliant project, and that brings in the most vulnerable community in Birmingham: women, victims of domestic violence, drug users, homeless people, into the arts organization. And really, you know, this is basically next to the entrance to the new station. So you can see how these worlds can connect, but they don't connect by accident. There has to be a lot of work and deliberate planning happening, and Grand Union is one of our great advocates for community-led planning. So strategic approach at the city level is essential to support place-based interventions, but it doesn't have to be major. We can start very small. If we focus on assets, you know, it could be as small as pocket parks, and we have done successfully 8 pocket parks. We're preparing for another 8 in East Birmingham only, and they have been the most gorgeous examples of community mobilizing and building that social capital on a micro scale, because you start from something that people can touch, that they emotionally attach to. This is something that they pass on their way to school, dropping kids off. They have emotional attachment to these places, and when you start from something like this, you can expand, you can enhance the conversation about, you know, what economy for this place do we need, what skills are we missing, how can we come together in a much more a thoughtful way, an organized way. But you have to start from something that people have their emotional, that people are emotionally attached to. So this is a gorgeous and very successful example. And absolutely on the city level, local authority level, that big macro thinking and the relentless effort to put finance in the right place is absolutely essential. And yes, and really thinking of economy. Let's not forget about economy and making these neighborhoods economic successes, really understanding the markets and connecting people with viable income streams.
Okay, thank you, Joe and Carolina, for sharing your journey from economic development plans all the way to Pride in Place. I found it very interesting. I'm sure everyone else did. So we'll now be moving on to your perspectives of how local authorities are taking a supportive and cooperative approach to Pride in Place. And we will first go to Thomas Fish, Head of Town Centre Regeneration from Kirklees Council. So over to you, Tom.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so this is a picture of Dewsbury Town Hall, and thank you for having me. I'm going to just talk through the journey we've been on and the journey we're going through as part of Pride in Place. So rather than kind of a standard input on the update on the details of the plan, I'll just talk about the journey first, but then we'll go into some of the details of the regen plan that we have submitted as part of Pride in Place, and hopefully get a positive response from government shortly. So there was already governance infrastructure in place because Dewsbury was lucky enough to have town investment plan funding. So there was a Dewsbury town board, and we're still working and have supported the board to work on delivering some of those transformational projects, addressing some of the existing problems that Dewsbury faces, but also kind of those are the things we can build on in the new regeneration plan. So I think the first thing that we had to reflect on was how we moved from administering, having the governance system in terms of the town investment plan to a more inclusive, pride in place driven regeneration plan. So we really wanted to look at what the community wanted. So the regeneration plan kind of evolved into a place-based framework rather than a document that was delivering essentially capital transformational projects. And as I said, some of those are still ongoing. We're delivering a new market and town park. We're redeveloping a listed Victorian arcade, which will be taken on by a community interest company corporation, and we've done public realm improvements as well. But we were at start as part of the plan for neighbourhoods process. We started to evolve, so changed the terms of reference of the board to reflect the Dewsbury, to evolve the Dewsbury Town Board into the Dewsbury Neighbourhood Board. So I think it's moved from oversight to kind of place leadership, and as part of that, we embedded community engagement as part of that. We brought on board some consultants, Counter Context, who've led our community engagement, and really got embedded in the community over a 12-month period. And we had the tagline, "Our Future Dewsbury," and that engagement that's been undertaken by Counter Context is currently been nominated for a Pineapple Award in terms of how we really embedded what the people of Dewsbury want. There was work in schools, work with the local colleges, there was work embedded in the South Asian community, which is a big part of Dewsbury, and it's really kind of set the framework of how we're going to start engaging and engage more meaningfully with the people of Dewsbury, and that's really been set in the framework of the regeneration plan. But it really is how we are now working to try and evolve the board. I think as part of that, we're working with the chair of the board to establish working groups, and those working groups will feed into kind of setting the monitoring framework, the key performance indicators that we want to be held accountable to around the 6 themes of intervention that we've put in the regeneration plan. So as part of working with the board, the separate working groups, we're really now trying to evolve and understand how they can make the recommendations to deliver those interventions based on the funding, to report back to board, which takes the pressure or the onus off council officers and just encourages the neighbourhood board to take a lead on delivering these things, and we're in that process now. So we've already evolved the terms of reference for the town board, the neighbourhood board, and now we need to do it again to reflect pride in place, and it's a really pertinent timing to do that as we get the new funding streams based on the interventions coming forwards. And getting that kind of community buy-in, but that community leadership as well. So just to go into a bit of detail about Dewsbury and about what's in the plan. So it's a historical West Yorkshire market town. It has the benefit, as I said, of the town investment plan funding and projects that are ongoing as well, but it's on the Transpennine route upgrade as well. So its connectivity to Leeds and Manchester and other parts of across the kind of east to west, north of England connections are going to improve. It's on the longer term route for mass transit through West Yorkshire Combined Authority, and there's a new bus station being delivered as we speak. But there are existing challenges, and those existing challenges of what we've already tried to address. There's economic fragility in the town centre, as there are in lots of places. We've got high vacancy rates and underperforming retail assets. And we need to continue to work on the transformation of that, supporting the board and the people of Dewsbury. Safety and security was a big issue that was brought up as part of that community engagement, and that's one of the real focus points of the new regeneration plan in terms of improving safety and security. So a big chunk of the revenue funding we will get will employ multidisciplinary officers to address some of those challenges, and also co-funding the police to have a greater resource to address some of those challenges as well. Connectivity and accessibility, as I said, the new bus station is fantastic. We've already done some active travel schemes as part of the town investment plan. The Transpennine route upgrade and having the train station to the north of the town centre is a real benefit, and we need to build on that, and some of the funding that will come forward as part of the regeneration plan will do that in a couple of years' time, alongside allocated funding for creative and cultural events, growth plans, acquisition and redevelopment of underused sites. So I think, thinking about our role, we obviously still have that role to support the board through the governance that we've already got in place, and as the accountable body for the funding, we know we have to be robust and transparent in our monitoring, and that's part of the conversations we're having with the chair and the board members. We've got experience and expertise in acquiring and redeveloping new sites. As I said, we're leading on the redevelopment of the historic market and the arcade, and we'll need to support board with some of those elements. The master planning and creating those investable ideas that leverage in funding from our partners that we've already been speaking to in Homes England. Historic England have funded schemes as well as engaging with the private sector. We see will still provide that supporting role there. But in other ways, we want to devolve, we want to give the power to these working groups and to the board to think about supporting businesses, supporting high streets, particularly the creative and cultural industries, and come up with a refresh of what we've had in place before, where people can bid for funding and we can provide some assurance, but have it as light touch as possible so the community can run and lead on delivering what the community and the board want, and making it as streamlined as possible for that funding that is available to be utilised quickly without being too governance heavy. So I think in terms of the next steps, imminently, the next board meeting is tomorrow. So we'll be going and providing updates on the town investment plan schemes, but really with the hope and anticipation that we'll get a positive outcome from the regeneration plan. We'll be providing updates on these working groups, the evolution of the board, looking at the membership and where there might be some gaps, looking at working with the chair, we're looking at the skills that the board might need. So looking at where health might need to play a greater part, where charity input and business. There is a good broad cross section of representatives from the community already, but I think it's important to keep that under review, and with the interventions that we've got coming out of the new regeneration plan, it's the time to do it. I think we think and we support the board to do that. So yeah, over the next 6 months, we will be working with the board to put the groundwork in place to really hit the ground running with the new regeneration plan over that 10-year time frame. And the other thing that we're doing now is really looking at how engagement can continue. And I think this is one thing that we've had to consider around where support comes from. And how you continue that engagement, because it can be quite resource intensive, and as much as the board are keen and supportive and passionate about what the board needs to do and achieve, they are volunteers and they have other jobs or other responsibilities. So it's considering that resource that needs to be brought in around that community engagement that we've been so successful in doing to be nominated for an award, but it was quite kind of resource intensive in terms of funding and time, and that capacity funding doesn't necessarily stretch into the 10 years of delivering the plan. So we need to think carefully and creatively as how we maintain that momentum and kind of, as I've said, have more of that scaffolding around engaging with the community and having their input and views on how the regeneration plan continues to move forward, rather than it being a strict kind of more capital focused delivery of projects. So I think I'll leave it there, if that's okay, if that's an effective summary of where we've got to in Dewsbury, and happy to take questions at the appropriate time.
Okay, thanks Tom for sharing the approach you're taking in Kirklees. So next we are hoping to go to Councillor Sue Smith, portfolio holder for communities and cooperation from Rochdale Council, and also Ben Greenwood, who is the head of corporate policy at Rochdale.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I'll start off and then ask Councillor Smith to share some further reflections. So we're very early days in our Pride and Place programmes, but even in these early days, we have absolutely put community engagement and cooperative principles at the heart of our programmes. And I think as one of the previous speakers said, if you don't have that community engagement and you don't have that the community feeling they own these programs, it won't meet the objectives for Pride and Place. I would also say that Rochdale does have good, already good structures for community engagement through our townships model, and that's certainly we've been building on. So, as I said, I'm going to say a few words about where we are in the three programmes, although it is very early days, and then I'll invite Councillor Smith to share a few reflections about the council's approach, even in these early days. So, we've got three programmes: Haywood, Smallbridge, and Hursthead, and finally the Impact Fund, which has a focus on Middleton. In Haywood, delivery starts in April, although Haywood is already seeing improvements from the money invested, including the refurbishment of the civic centre, which is at the heart of the town and obviously a source of pride for residents. So to enable that programme to be taken forward, the council is considering setting up a legal entity, and we're actively considering that entity to be a cooperative. The next programme is the Smallbridge and Hursthead. Again, lots of engagement before delivery with a real community engagement spurred by Rochdale MP Paul War. So working in partnership with our parliamentarians, and following the community engagement, a neighbourhood board will be set up by summer. Again, a cooperative model for that board is being considered. And finally, to our final programme, the Impact Fund. But as part of that, I want to touch on the Middleton Mayoral Development Corporation as well. So community engagement and cooperative ways of working are absolutely at the heart of the Middleton MDC, and we were really pleased that Steve Coogan and Rose Marley, Co-ops UK's chief executive, have agreed to joint chair it. We launched the MDC in about November, and it's fair to say it's really generated a buzz in the town. And we also looked at doing the engagement differently. So traditionally, the council would do the initial engagement through its channels, and working with groups. But given our commitment for the MDC to really put community at the heart of it, we've partnered with Middleton Cooperating to undertake the community engagement, and that engagement will continue until March, and will inform what we do with the Pride of Place funding. So that's a very, very brief overview of where we are with our Pride in Place. As I say, very early days, but we've absolutely put our our approach is working with the community.
Crucially, it must reflect the community, this board, though. So it's residents, volunteers, people who work here, businesses, faith leaders, youth voices, schools, as I say. But everyone will have a strict code of conduct to make sure they don't benefit personally from any of the decisions. You can benefit various organisations that are obviously doing hard work in the area, but that's the rough ground rules. The board will be led by an independent local chair. Someone who's respected and rooted in the community is the main criterion for this. But they cannot, and this is worth me stressing, the chair of this cannot be an elected official. It can't be me, it can't be a councillor, it's got to be someone from the community. And that is really, really worth saying. The chair must be approved by the government. Obviously, you've got various checks, but then they will lead the recruitment of the rest of the board. So we need ideas for who should be on the board. And again, that's one of the reasons we're here tonight. The board must listen first before it does anything. So it's got to consult the community. The board can't suddenly become a law unto itself. Everything it does has got to be consulted on with the community and residents. And if it doesn't do that, the government will step in and say, sorry, you can't spend that money because you haven't done enough consultation. So this is a double check on making sure this is really residents represented. So it can't be some sort of closed shop. So who signs off the cash? Well, legally, in the short term, the way the government's constructed this is the council has to be the accountable body initially. That's just an accounting thing. So they're the ones who make sure every pound's spent properly within the rules. But the decisions about what gets funded comes from the neighbourhood board. So effectively, the council will be almost like an accountant, just checking on things. That's to start off with. But by year 3 of this, and don't forget, as I keep saying, this is a long-term thing, a 10-year thing, the board will be led entirely by the community, possibly by becoming a community interest company, a charity, or a cooperative. So it would be a completely independent entity, and it will do the sign-off, not the council, after 3 years.
So thanks to Rochdale for sharing their experiences, and Ben for your contributions there. We next have Neil McIlvenny, the Interim Director for Regeneration at Inverclyde Council. So Neil, over to you.
Yep, so just a short few slides just to give an example of what one of the town boards is doing north of the border. So just talking about Greenock, so Greenock's within Inverclyde, just to give you a scale of Inverclyde, it's a population of about 40,000 people. The wider Inverclyde area has got about, just short of 80,000 population, so quite a small local authority on the central west coast of Scotland. This is also just the introductory slide, and it refers to Pride in Place funds, because there's more going into the, from Pride in Place Fund and other funding sources to create a wider regeneration programme within Greenock that's looking to effect strategic change over a kind of period of probably about 10, 15, 20 years. The slides here are sort of part that, the pictures in the front cover are sort of just a bit of a story of, a Victorian, settlement which has got rich in industry based on coastal marine-based industries, shipbuilding, through into the decline of that sort of industrial past, and into a bit of 1960s, 70s brutalist architecture and infrastructure, which has had, certainly of its time, perhaps served the town at a point in time, but it's certainly very much outmoded, and we're looking to physically regenerate the town, but also regenerate it in terms of resilience of the population. I'll go on to talk about some of that. What about Greenock? So, as I said, it's a reasonable sized town in the central west coast of Scotland, sitting right on the Clyde, the River Clyde. It's part of the wider Glasgow metropolitan city region, which means it's got access to a labour market of over 1 million people within an hour's travel time. Proud history of marine-based economic activities, and obviously shipbuilding is a big thing. You can see that just driving along the coastline from Glasgow, that the signs of a previously much greater scale of activity. However, that's declined and left some fairly profound socioeconomic challenges within Greenock and Inverclyde. And just highlighting some of those, within the Glasgow City region of the 8 authorities, Inverclyde's certainly an outlier in terms of it's got the lowest GVA per hour worked and per capita in the region. It's got a workforce that's suffering worse health. It's got SIMD data zones that are quite profound, disproportionate loss of jobs, and COVID has accelerated that, and particularly high value jobs. So we found ourselves, struggling with job density, etc., and providing for our own workforce. We've suffered population decline for a number of years. I said the population's it's actually just under 80,000, and it's going down, but it's predicted to be the worst proportionate jump in Scotland. So that's a thing in Scotland. Up the west coast, particularly in some of the the Highlands and Islands areas do suffer from rural depopulation, but actually it's something that's happening in relative close proximity to the wider Glasgow City region. And of course, we've got an ageing population as well, which puts pressure on services and makes the sort of conundrum of getting the place right for people in communities that live here all the more important. So for all those reasons, we've got that sort of history of industrial decline, paired with socioeconomic challenges, and we're well in the midst of quite an expansive regeneration programme in Greenock, and it needs the opportunities that come from funding like Pride in Place and the setup around that to invest in people in place to make a more sustainable place for the future. So just a little bit about the establishment of the Greenock Town Board. So like, probably the other examples, we were awarded the £20 million over a 10-year basis and established the Town Board in 2024. There's nothing spectacular about the composition of the board in terms of that it includes elected councillors, MP, MSP. It's got local area commanders for the police, local business leaders, Chamber of Commerce, community and third sector representatives. It's chaired by Lord Willie Haughey, a prominent businessman locally, and who is been good enough to give us his time to lead the board for the time being. And so we've got that board set up. It's been set up since 2024. I suppose just the last couple of bullets in this slide are the key points about where we are, and a lot of the boards, certainly in Scotland, have taken a more independent role in terms of operating externally, and the council being the accountable financial body, but essentially nothing more than that. We've got quite a strong relationship between the council as the executive function for the board, and that's allowed us to utilise and tie into local community planning partnerships and networks. So some of the engagement we carried out over the duration of the board has been, we've simply been able to tap into and access local communities, local community groups, promote it through local planning partnership, to bring in more engagement and get some true feeling around community groups, and that's been able to access things like special interest groups, youth groups, and so there's a kind of nuance to that that's been quite advantageous to us in terms of linking that up with the executive function being provided by the council. We've got one officer at the moment managing the board, and we're likely to probably increase that modestly to provide more delivery capacities. We, like other boards, ramp up into that delivery phase. The other notable thing I'd say is we have 10 members on the board, so it's at the minimum level of what the sort of guidance allows to have. What we found that has led to is quite a focused and dynamic board that is able to set priorities quite clearly. So there's not a lot of spending time thinking about things overly. It's quite decisive action based on the findings that we've had from community feedback, and that's I'll talk about the priorities of the board in a couple of slides, but we've certainly found the small nature of the board and linked with the council means that there's quite a dynamic functioning board that we've got in place at the moment, and hopefully we carry that through to delivery. I like to think of the Pride in Place Town Board project or component of the regeneration as a part of the jigsaw. For Greenock, as I mentioned, we've got a wider programme of investment going on. You can see over in the bottom corner of the red text that we've got over £70 million invested in so far, or going to be invested in Greenock. So it's £20 million through Pride in Place Town Fund. It's been hugely welcome, and we will certainly make good use of that funding, but it's part of a wider programme of activity, which is seen certainly physical regeneration, but we're also looking at place-based regeneration, community capacity growth, etc. Some of the things that we've been doing so far in the picture here is of the terminal building, which we built through the city region funding at Greenock, and as I said, coastal region, industrial ports. We found that cruise ship traffic was coming into Greenock, and it was almost conflicting with the industrial use of the ports here. So what we did was invested in a terminal building separate from the industrial berths, and look to sort of create growth opportunities based on the sort of fundamentals of the place, the geography and the physical assets, so the coast. And we now have a 160,000 cruise ship passengers coming into Greenock on an annual basis. We've got a Level Up Fund project, which is now badged under the Pride in Place programme as well. Just about to start off, also £20 million, taking away some of that historic infrastructure, roads and retail infrastructure that's just outmoded and serves the town centre, and reinvigorating that town centre. So this is part of a story to regenerate Greenock, and obviously £70 million is a lot of money. We could and would spend more if we had access to it, and we'll probably not stop chasing further funds, but certainly building that into a wider programme means that we're not doing interventions that are one physical project and done, or a single programme and intervention and done. It's actually knitting this in. So if you look at Greenock from maybe 10 years ago to where we're at, 10 years time, so over a 20-year period, there will be significant investment in the place that will be visible and make the town more connected, better for visitors, better for businesses to thrive, utilising assets of the place. And that's sort of moving on from what we've seen in the last few years. I mentioned that we've lost a lot of jobs. Some of those have come from multinational companies that are effectively low-paid jobs, or distribution jobs, or jobs that effectively are fleet of foot and could be anywhere. So we change that by moving to economy based on the place and based on the assets, based on the coast, and maximising those and maximising the links between them. So where we've got to is, we've worked through the governance and it was mentioned earlier on, terms of reference updates and whatnot, just to get us to the place we're at the moment, which is that we've finalised the regeneration plan, submitted that to UK government. I think actually we've only just heard recent feedback that, that's positive, some recommendations which we'll take on board and move forward. But through all that, it's been developing priorities, engagement at different stages, developing of interventions, and that's got us to a place where, as I said, the board have been quite keen on setting their own agenda and being quite focused on their priorities. So entrepreneurialism, town centre and community resilience have been sort of three of the top priorities that have come out of the board. And we've, over the piece, through the sort of executive side, working with the board, working with communities, understanding capacity, developed a range of interventions within the regeneration plan. So some of it includes public realm and placemaking. So as I said, we've got £20 million to, really, take away historic and, brutalist infrastructure and create a more green and connected place. There's follow-on investment expected through that to make sure that we have a situation where we've had cruise ship passengers on a sort of triple lane roundabout that's just completely outmoded. So can we connect all that, make it better with the project, and then use town fund money to really wayfinding and cultural content, and encourage people to stay and spend in Greenock and help businesses and enjoy their experience. Entrepreneurialism, so we've got a Greenock Enterprise Hub that we're looking at. There's been a sort of aspiration to have a kind of business incubator centre, and we're certainly looking at that, but we have to get the model right for Greenock, because it isn't, it's not Glasgow, it's not got the critical mass, so we need to make sure that capital investment's funded. We've got Future Ready Greenock, which is just about to go into the schools curriculum for senior phase pupils to sort of get experience of entrepreneurialism, running businesses, even stuff like piloting businesses and encouraging pupils to grow their own. Thriving town centre again, so community grants being part of that to encourage community groups to bring forward their own ideas and deliver and ultimately bring the capacity. And I do anticipate that quite a bit of the £20 million will come into a zone where it's been delivered by the community. We've got heritage projects, linking up some of the heritage that Greenwood has. It was one of the biggest sugar manufacturing and distribution plants in the world at one point in time. So there's history around that. It was one of the left-off points for overseas travel and immigration to North America. So again, some of that is coming into heritage projects. Looking at living within town centres, recognising that retail isn't what it was anymore. In some place marketing and branding, there is perception around Greenock that it's down in its luck a little bit. So we're looking to brand it and market it to show that that's not the case, and we've actually had quite a lot of interest, for example, house builders to actually come here when they hadn't been thinking about that for the last 5-10 years. So so that the image and the perception matters as well. So we're in a good place. We've moved forward. We've got the priorities set and really the agenda for the programme of interventions we've got, and those are some of them procurement, some of them in development, and we're getting moving in that. So as I say, with quite a dynamic board, we're hopeful that the Pride in Place Town Fund is really going to play a pivotal role in that wider regeneration programme that I was referencing about the reinvigoration and resilience of Greenock and Inverclyde. So I'll leave it there. Again, with the panel, happy to take questions.
Okay, thanks, Neil, for that contribution. And obviously, I'm from Inverclyde, so I already know the vast majority of the work that we're embarking on there. But as you said, Pride in Place is just one part of a wider regeneration effort that we're taking on here in Inverclyde. So we'll now move to questions, and I'll go to the first question, which is from someone who's no stranger to our network, Nicola Huckabee, our former Chief Executive. Nicola asks, what advice would speakers give to those who have recently won Pride in Place funding?
I would just repeat what I said before, that we need, as local authorities, we need to seize some of the power and agree that the communities know what they need the most and find that sweet spot where we are not blocking, where we're not getting in the way of the good progress. So exercise trust would be my advice, and absolutely back it with funding and provide that positive incentive in the way of the right kind of funding. So not short-term, short deadlines, very specific bums on seats, but actually the more development, long-term financial planning for the right kind of interventions.
I suppose as the one non-council person who's spoken today, I think from my perspective, it sort of follows on from what Carolina said, but it's about ownership. It's about making sure your communities feel they own those Pride in Place initiatives, and that consultation isn't a one hit. It's not just now, but it's something that is continued, that engagement, that consultation, if we want to call it consultation, but that engagement and that ownership continues throughout the whole 10 years. And I think big local boards have been a really good example about how that can happen. So, there is learning out there, and I think, build on that.
I think I'd just build on what's already been said. I think from experience of board, I think having that governance and legal process in place in the background, so it's really smooth in terms of your relationship with the board, but also that feedback to communities, because if you're not, that ongoing engagement, if you're not feeding back the progress that you are making, then negative voices can fill the void, or people feel like they're not being engaged, and that can overtake kind of some of your board meetings or your communications. So really just making sure you're continually feeding back on the progress that you are making.
Just to reiterate what everyone else said, really, I think, as I said in my presentation, it's the community engagement, making sure the community is involved every step of the way, because this won't work if people feel it's been done to, which is why we're so pleased with how the MDC is going, because we really have put working with the community right at the heart of it. So yeah, just agree with what everyone else says. The lesson to be learned. Thank you.
From my point of view, probably, and maybe it's come across in the presentation, I think getting the composition of the board right at the outset is really important, because if you have a good operational dynamic board, it lets you set the priorities, and it lets you, go and define the interventions that you need. And from Greenwick's point of view, that flow has been there because the board was right. It works well together. They've defined the priorities, and then you can see that the interventions that are coming in behind that are not detached from that. They're actually fully influenced by that. So I think it all stems back to getting the board composition right, and and a good functioning board.
So looking over the next 2 to 3 years, where do you feel that Pride in Place could stumble without the right support?
It can turn into the short-term interventions, or just focusing on high streets, focusing on what we see now. And the benefit of community economic development planning, and what Joe was saying in our opening presentation, is that you continuously review the plan. So the plan is a long-term process that keeps iterating and keeps asking the right questions over the period of time. And I think this is probably the most important part that needs to be put in place. It's not like local authorities tend to work along, big regeneration strategies. And, Birmingham is definitely no stranger to that. We love our regeneration strategies. We love our master plans. We put them in place, and then we try and deliver. But the beauty of community planning, community economic development planning, is that it iterates, that it responds better to the local capacity to deliver. So yes, absolutely, assets, but combining them with the organizational capacity to own them, to have functioning income streams behind them. So we don't put organizations at risk. We don't give too much. We don't put too much on their shoulders, but we actually support them to succeed.
I think over the next 2 to 3 years, the danger is that the initial excitement and hope over Pride in Place sort of diminishes, and it's seen as, oh well, you've got a 10-year plan, you don't need us anymore, and therefore organisations disengage with it, particularly those who don't have the capacity. I think the third sector organisations, will really struggle with continued engagement. So it's how do you enable that to happen in the longer term, and not just see it as this initiation phase when it's all very new and exciting and sexy. That will wear off.
I've been around in community development for a number of years through a number of programs stretching right back to urban aid. And what we need to do is actually develop community development strategies, so we can actually create people who can then come through and be empowered to come through and be on these boards, be involved in these initiatives. But we've had a continuation historically of a number of initiatives which need to be, and they come for a short period, and they need to be sustainable. And so local authorities should be investing more in ongoing community development work.
I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we've got a really clear plan, and I think that energy will be there. But I think in terms of practicality barriers, it will be, I think the makeup of the board may change. The political cycles have an inevitable interest on the kind of those representatives who are there. We've got a big election coming up in May where all councillors are up for election, and those advocates, those representatives, and also any change in kind of leadership at the council and where they want to kind of place their priorities. We support the board, but we're a small team, so kind of resources within the local authority setting and what their kind of political priorities are. Obviously there's a program to support here, and we will support, but it's that level of support, and it's the capacity in those other services that might need to help deliver some of those interventions. So it's always something that's under review, but that could be a potential stumbling block. But I would hope not, because we've got an established board, an established programme.
That initial enthusiasm, we need to keep on maintaining that, and really keep our promises. It's a shame the gremlins in the system haven't allowed Councillor Smith to speak, because we definitely she's definitely an advocate of not just paying lip service to community engagement, but really doing it, really listening to people and continuing that buy-in, because if we don't, as I said, it will fail on its own terms.
Yeah, I suppose a couple of thoughts that I've got is that obviously there's been a bit of change since the inception of the programme. I think that the whole point in something like Pride in Place and neighbourhood plans and whatnot is local determinism. So I think the flexibility from government to define interventions that are needed locally, is really important, and that will quite obviously vary across a lot of different locations. And that's obviously, I think, even from the the showcase presentations that you've had so far. And then I think probably the second bit to me is delivery. So there's been a bit of a kind of motoring through the process of governance and whatnot to get to regeneration plans. I think once the funding tap turns on in a sort of big sense, it's got to be go for it and deliver, so that it builds the confidence. And I think from Greg's point of view, we're already using the funding to attempt to lever in other funding sources. So that will bring confidence that there's opportunities for funding out there that the Pride in Place Fund could help build on. So I think flexibility to allow localities to do what they think is the right thing for their places, and delivery for me would be the two things.
Thanks for that, Neil. The next question comes from Jonathan Downs from Oldham Council. Jonathan asks, we talk a lot about community voice, but he's particularly interested in how Pride in Place reaches people who don't normally engage, for example, young people. So Carolina, we'll go back to you to start.
Well, it's the $1 million questions, because the engagement, I think the engagement is probably the wrong question. We would need to look how we define engagement and where we at. Usually, and I hear it a lot, and I say it a lot, that there aren't communities that are hard to engage. We're just not going to the places where they are. And for young people, the places often are online these days, because we took away the places where they would normally congregate. We forbid them to stand in the parks and on the corners. We deem them, risky, or we want to protect them from getting into trouble. So they are online. Are we enough online? And I think this is the question. This is not the question about how difficult they are to engage, but are we able to go where they are? And I don't, we try like everyone else tries, and some of the interventions are better, some are weaker. And the horizon shifts and changes very quickly as well. So this continues to be a massive challenge for Birmingham as well. But one of the youngest cities in the UK and in Europe for that matter. So we do a lot of work, but it has to be around creating spaces and enabling spaces where young people feel welcome, and where bringing back spaces for them, being more deliberate in creating safe spaces for them. And this is at the backdrop of a national landscape where we have youth provision this funded. And so whoever has got the answer to this question, I'm all ears.
I'm going to say something that I've been dying to say probably all morning, and it's probably heresy, but you do know that consultation is a bit of a dirty word actually out in communities. And so it's about being very careful about how we think, what we think that is, because it's quite often not what is generally perceived as consultation. I think for me, if you want to, as Carolina says, they're not hard to reach. Quite often people are just looking in the wrong places. And for me, it's about using those community anchor organisations. It's about using those trusted voices that already exist within communities and enabling them to have those conversations, and to enable the people that they reach out to have a voice within those, and so actually the answer is councils don't, but trusted organisations do. And you know, Carolina said earlier, we need to learn to trust the communities, and I think that's kind of the challenge I would put back to you as councils.
Yeah, so just building on the what I mentioned around the engagement that we'd done to feed into the regeneration plan, I think although it's resource intensive, I think going and speaking to those young people to feed into the plans, I think we went to Kirklees College and had workshops and through the consultants and asked them specific questions about how they perceived the place and how they felt the place needed to change. Also engage with students at Huddersfield University, and there's the primary school just outside the ring road of the town centre. So all those places physically going and engaging. As I say, it's resource intensive, but it's a really good way to get the mood of the people who will want to use those places and to see them moving forward. So that's kind of it's one way alongside everything else that we need to do, but I think it had added some real value to that kind of wholesale engagement of the wider community.
Thanks, Thomas. Ben?
Yeah, I think the point of was very well made about councils letting go, really. And again, without labouring the point, this is why we asked Middleton cooperating to lead the engagement. You know, they're fully rooted in the community, as you know, as our councillors are as well. So you know, they have obviously have a role to play in getting the community, all sections of the community, to take part and let their voices heard. So I think the point about you know, giving that sort of, having that trust, giving away you know, control, which is not always easy for local authorities, I know, but it's a very point well made, and something we as Councillor Smith would have acknowledged is what we put at the heart of what we're doing in Middleton.
Just a couple of points just on the sort of young people and youth aspect. We've been quite, I mean, obviously we've got priorities around town centre and entrepreneurialism. Those have been, you know, and you know, the chair himself has been quite clear that he wants the entrepreneurialism focus to be actually levelled at, you know, school age, so that we're not actually seeing people that are, you know, leaving school and, you know, getting to be on the, you know, the opportunity sort of horizon to get into some of these entrepreneurial programs. So it's actually building into the DNA of the curriculum, that kind of spirit, so that the interventions are being targeted at that. We've tried to focus some of the engagement on young people so far, and I suppose just that, you know, relating to the last point, as we trip over into the kind of key delivery phase. Some of the kind of aspects that we've been looking at are, you know, we did a sort of grant program around community engagement to actually just give a little bit of money to organisations that were external to council to sort of engage with their audience and try and build up an idea of what their priorities and capacity to deliver are. I think it's going to be hard, you know, that community capacity and delivering to the community is going to be hard, but it's going to be, you know, vital and probably rewarding if we actually do that. It will lead to more resilience in the community. So it's certainly part of the thinking. I don't think, you know, engaging with young people who, you know, and I think the comment accurately probably says that it can be hard to engage those groups. I think it will be hard to sort of bring that in, but you know, it's got to be done. It's got to be done to bring in young people, to bring in communities, to diversify that delivery capacity. And if that's an outcome of the programme, irrespective of the the local interventions, that will certainly look like success. Yeah, but it'll be hard.
That just leaves me to thank everyone for joining us here today. A special thanks to our panelists, Carolina, Joe, Tom, Ben and Neil, for their excellent contributions and their insight into this area and what they're doing in their local authority areas in terms of pride and place. And with that, I thank you for joining us today, and I hope you have a good day.